This is Family Electric Ghost, and we are live on the Cera Gibson. And thank you for coming on the
Hello.
show tonight. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me. It's been a while since we've spoken.
So, talk.
Oh no, you're breaking up a
Yeah,
little
you were
bit.
part of our Peg Bedroom Producer Festival. You gave us a lot of. Can you hear me? Oh,
I can hear you.
I just
I
had to
just see you
get
breaking
my.
up.
Yeah, you can hear me. You're breaking
I
up.
can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I got my. It's okay. Well, I'm trying to. I got my signal on as powerful as I can. So it will stay stable. It's probably because I'm trying to do the
Yes.
Spotify thing too. But once I turn that off, it'll probably stop being. Is it okay now? Does it look better?
Yes, it sounds great.
Okay, cool. So like one of the things we do is that we actually have a sponsor called Newsly. You can see up there. You can see listen on Newsly. It's another podcast platform. It's actually going to allow people to hear this podcast after we're done. And if you use coupon code Ghost, you can get a subscription, so you can stop scrolling and start listening. But what we want to talk about today is you have a brand new single called Daddy, and we
Yes.
actually have it queued up that we're going to get into, and then we're probably going to talk about it more. Tonight we're going to do our typical type of behind the music type of interview, and we'll focus on Daddy because let's see if I can pull that up, and we're going to play the song. I'll put you on mute, and then we'll talk about how you came in. This song came to be, and we'll talk to you about what you're doing now and where everybody can expect going into 2023. So
Perfect.
let's play the song.
Down, I'm in control. I wanna be you.
Sorry, I thought I had to cue it up. Here we go.
I
It's
want
okay.
you to call me daddy. Lay your pretty head down. I'm in control now. I wanna be your daddy. Oh, you're a big, strong man, so I'ma do what I can. You spend so much time being tough. Honey, I know the job can get a little rough. So let me be your daddy. Lay your pretty head down, I'm in control now. Show me what you're working with. I wanna see all that beauty within. You've been out here busting your ass for the cash, and I love the way you win. Oh, you're a real straight shooter, a smooth motherfucker, baby. How do I get in? So I want you. I want you to call me daddy. Lay your pretty head down, I'm in control now. I wanna be your daddy. Oh, you're a big, strong man, so I'ma do what I can. You spend so much time being tough. Honey, I know the job can get a little rough. So let me be your daddy. Lay your pretty head down, I'm in control now. The way that you're loving me, I wanna lie in the body of steel. I won't undermine your masculinity, baby, it's just how I feel. So you can come on over, lean on my shoulder, let yourself feel. I want you. I want you to call me daddy. Lay your pretty head down, I'm in control now. I wanna be your daddy. Oh, you're a big, strong man, so I'ma do what I can. You spend so much time being tough. Honey, I know the job can get a little rough. So let me be your daddy. Lay your pretty head down, I'm in control now. control now. I wanna be your daddy. You're a big, strong man, so I'ma do what I can. You spend so much time being tough, honey. I know the job can get a little rough, but let me be your daddy. Lay your pretty head down, I'm in control now.
Yay.
So that I love that song. Let me get back to our main screen. There, we're back. Hey, you can hear me,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I can hear you.
I love that song. Has a 90s vibe. It has kind of a Prince vibe.
A
I
little
like
bit.
the way
Prince.
you yeah, yeah, it just seems like it to me. But I'm a Prince head, so I always like project that.
Well, Prince was one of the inspirations for the instrumental, so you definitely picked up the right vibes.
Yeah, I love the way it comes together, and you've got the like you're singing with your background vocals. It's all you, right? That's all you singing.
Yes, it's all me.
And so, did you totally produce that, or did you work with a producer? Is this all you?
No, so I worked with a producer. My friend Tyler Harris, he's actually in his own band called Future Ex Boyfriend. He produced this with me. I had made a little demo with a friend many years ago, like almost 3 years ago now. And I never thought this would do anything because I was purely making it for fun.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but recently my online presence has kind of shifted and I felt like it was the perfect time to like bring it into fruition. And Tyler's an incredible guitarist. I have like a really good mind for synths, but
Hmm.
I felt like I needed someone who was just like money on the guitar to help bring it to life. And so he was perfect for it.
So you had the synth version of the song for like 3 years, but you didn't have the guitar part.
Yeah, yeah. So I had like the fundamentals with my little synthy vibes, but no guitar.
Yeah, it's interesting because that kind of vibe I've always been into. You know, that kind of the Prince like Dirty Mind vibe, or the you
Hmm.
know the where you're gonna you're playing on the words. I like how you use that the idea of daddy, and you're the daddy.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like that's not how you're probably coming into the song. You see the picture on the photo. You're like, oh, okay, that's what it's about. And then you hear it, it's like, oh, she's coming at it a different way. So then you have to think about what you're saying. You have to think about the
Yeah.
lyrics. But it's I think it's really cool because
Thank
I've
you.
always been into that, like what I do with the Ghost and Josephine is the idea of like playing with sexuality, playing with polymorphism, playing with those kind of ideas. And some people today, oh, they don't want to go there. But I
Hmm.
think if you're an artist and that's where your head's at, that's it's cool. So how do you feel like you're projecting, this idea that you had for 3 years? What made you feel like it would work now?
Well, so initially I wrote the song because the idea around the song is that like inviting your masculine partner to be vulnerable without like giving up their masculinity. And it's like, well, today I'm going to be daddy. I'm going to let you be vulnerable. It's not really about like domination or anything
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, yeah,
It's about
yeah.
emotional vulnerability. But I wrote it in a way that was just a little bit more fun. I think I had more fun with it than I do with a lot of songs, but I kind of stashed it away because this was prior to me putting out my recent EP, Uninspired, and that was
Mhm.
kind of what I was most focused on. So after that was out, and this year started, I don't know, I think it was like around the summer that I started to really consider putting this song out. And the reason being that in the last year, I've blown up on TikTok, and a lot of it is I don't know, comedy based around playing with gender stereotypes and
Yeah.
those norms and leaning into like having fun with sexuality and playing that up. And oddly enough, my audience gave me the moniker Mommy Daddy. And I'm like, oh, this fits into this so perfectly.
Well, you can
I
pull
have
your
to put
song
it
off the
out.
shelf. Yeah, you can pull it
Yeah.
off the shelf because you started get and I saw that new reel that you put up that was like the TikTok that I guess they pushed off. You hit like what, 500K or something, and then
Oh, no.
they
Yeah, I hit 5 million on that
5,000,000K.
video.
Yeah, and then I guess they what do they do? They like if you hit too big, they just take it down.
No, it's so because I'm having a little bit of fun with my videos and we're playing around with like gender norms and sexuality and stuff, I upset people.
Oh,
They're like, no, you shouldn't be doing this. And so I get reported a lot. And so some of my most successful videos actually will get taken down because they get reported so much. But thankfully,
oh,
oftentimes they get put back up. That was just one of those videos that didn't make it. Yeah.
wow. That's cool. I mean, I like the ideas that you're, because I've been playing with ideas, and sometimes one time I don't know, I was on SoundCloud, and my old SoundCloud it got like banned because
Oh man.
somebody didn't like something Josephine was saying, and
That's really what
Josephine,
it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't like it because I was doing this like fantasy where Josie was like gonna flip it on a CEO, like
Oh.
she was kind of like she was gonna take him out.
Hmm.
And it was kind of like it was like, murder mystery, but it was this
Yeah.
idea that she was gonna turn it around, and some people didn't like it. Some people like, men don't like it if a woman is strong, or they don't like it getting flipped. They don't like the idea of it.
Yeah,
And then
that's
Josephine,
often.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then Josephine makes it even more complicated because she's like the other half of me, and then people don't know how to
Yes.
deal with it.
No, it makes
So
perfect sense. Well, I fully relate to that because that's how my online presence is. Like, I have the two sides, like the mommy, the daddy, the moniker that they gave me. And because I
yeah,
play around with it, I make people uncomfortable. I'm not saying anything out of bounds necessarily. I think
mhm,
it's like the way I convey it. I actually got the best review on Daddy on my song recently that I feel like perfectly encapsulates what my online experience is and why I get a lot of flack is if what they said is they're like, I love the instrumental and the vocals, but like the cover makes me really uncomfortable as a man. And the idea of a girl wanting to be called daddy, it makes me really uncomfortable. And I think he used the word uncomfortable like 5 times. Like he's like, it's a good song, but I can't deny how uncomfortable it makes me. And I think that's how a lot of people feel about me is like, what you're doing is good. It's making me really uncomfortable though. And some
well, yeah,
people, it's enough to report me, you know?
yeah. That's so crazy because it's really about them. The whole thing is if
Yeah.
you think about you think about like Ziggy Stardust, right? The idea that
Mm-hmm.
Bowie had that he kind of turned guys on, he turned women on, right? He was
Yeah.
playing that role, and Prince did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Freddie Mercury would do the same thing, and then people would I always got confounded when you
Yes, I
see all
know.
these you allow these jocks getting so into Queen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're using it for soccer games. And it was like Freddie Mercury was this icon, but you're not acknowledging the other part of who he was.
Yeah, no,
And then you
exactly.
and then you're using all this kind of hyper sports, like, well, that's very alpha male. And Freddie wasn't exactly the alpha male, right? He was like a gender bender.
Yeah, he
And you're like,
was.
oh yeah, we are the champions, and you guys are just somehow segmenting that from the rest of his life. And I'm
Yeah.
like, how can you do that? And I was like, I guess you can. I guess you can compartmentalize and not think about it. But that's who he was. It's like, how can you not think in that way? And then you get upset if somebody tries to point it out, and you're like, oh, I don't want to think that way. It's like, well, that's the way it is.
Well, that's the way it is. And I think people get afraid to acknowledge those parts that they're less comfortable with because they're like, well, what does that say about me consuming this content? And it's like, it doesn't say anything about you. It's saying something about the artist, like appreciating art. It doesn't change your identity or the way you sit in the world. But I think a lot of people they feel fragile in themselves. Perhaps they have two sides of themselves that they're not acknowledging, and that's all right. We're all
Yeah,
on
I
our
think
own
what happens is
journey.
people get turned on by something, and then they're upset that they got turned on by it because they don't want to get turned on by it. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, then you blame the artist for putting you in that position, but it's you. I
No,
say,
exactly.
it's like how can you blame the artist for being so open-minded that they're going to challenge gender identity and they're going to put it in their work, and then you come
Yeah.
at it and you just want to think, well, I love the beat and everything, but like you can't deny what the rest of it's about, right? And so then you get upset, like, well, when somebody pushes you and says, "Hey, then you start to blame the artist. Oh, well, I didn't realize the song was about that, and now I want to blame the artist. And it's like, what's that got to do with anything? It's like art is art, like,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody should be allowed to express themselves. And in the fact that you're not strong enough in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to go put it outside yourself. It's like, okay, it's like I never could get into like now you want to get rid of things because it's like turning you on and you can't handle it.
Exactly. I'm like, whatever internal journey you're having, I have nothing to do with this. Maybe I was the instigator, but it's not my fault, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you're on your journey, and people
Yeah.
either come along with it or not. Like to me, it's like, okay, if you can't handle it, don't ban it.
Yeah,
Just
it's
don't
just
listen
not
to
for
it.
you, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like that's the whole thing. Why you got to cancel it if
Yeah.
just because you're upset, and then you got to put it into that frame. And I've been very into playing with ideas, and sometimes I can get people who challenge me. I came up with this idea called Pimp Scarlet. It's
Okay.
kind of about this. It's about this woman who's a vampire.
Oh,
But
that's sick.
somebody thinks they can pimp her, and they don't. They're just looking at her outward appearance, and they're thinking they can overpower her, but she's like a goddess.
Oh, sick.
And so there's the whole idea is like on the face of it, like, oh, you're trying to pimp Scarlet. It's like, well, you can't pimp Scarlet. That's the point,
I
right?
love that.
And so that kind of flips it. I could get people who could get mad, like feminists could kind of say, well, why are you going to pimp Scarlet? It's like, but did you listen to the whole song? Right, because
Yeah.
some people, they don't read the whole thing. They don't read the whole story, and then they just pick one thing out, and then they get
Yeah.
mad, and they wanna go, "Well, take that off the air," and it's like, that's
Yeah.
not like, listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, they stop where they get uncomfortable, and that's what I found with this song for the people that feel uncomfortable by it, is the second they hear me say that I want them to call me daddy, they're like, "Oh, I'm done." And then they
Yeah,
don't listen to the rest of the song where it's saying, "No, like, I want to provide you a space where you can be emotionally vulnerable as a man," you know? And,
yeah,
like, that's, I feel, an actually a wholesome message. It's just being delivered in kind of like a fun, cheeky
yeah, I mean,
lens.
it's kinda Damo, but it's not. It's kinda you're kinda coming into it initially like, "Oh, this is a
Yes.
dominatrix," but then, "Oh, it's not." And then
Mhm.
I took it like, "Wow, that's kinda cool," because I like you like the idea playing with a Damo idea, right, as a writer.
Yes.
But then you can kind of flip it and say, "Well, it's not exactly that," right?
Yeah.
It's actually I'm trying to get to the sensitive part of the man, and then people
Mhm.
don't, they were more thinking, "Oh, you're gonna be the dominatrix," and maybe they could
Yeah.
handle that, but then they can't handle when you flip it in the way that you flip it. Then they can't like, "Oh, this is too complicated." No,
This is
but
too whatever way that it causes them to be uncomfortable, it's kind of, I like that. It's kind of exciting because I'm like, "Oh, this is thought provoking." It's making them feel something, like you can't passively listen to it. And that's what I really like about the song, is that you're going to have an opinion either way.
well, I think that's the point of being an artist is you kind of want to, you want to challenge people. If you think about like Lou Reed and Walk on the Wild Side, he got that
Yeah.
through. He got that through the censors. People didn't initially they didn't pick it up
Mhm.
what he was putting down, and he had been doing that since '66. He had
Yeah.
been in the Velvet Underground. He had always gone into that kind of content. He was known for that.
Yeah.
And producers knew, all the songwriters that were really into the Velvets, they knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And just somehow he was able to get Bowie and all those guys to help him put out Transformer, and somehow he made a hit. And in that hit, it still had the Velvet Underground content,
It did.
but
Yeah.
somehow it got through the censors, and they didn't. And then later they like, oh, we let that through.
Yeah, I mean, if when you're being like very subtle with it, you can get away with a lot. I think
Yeah,
there are so many songs from like the 60s and 70s where when you listen to them with like new ears or like a modern lens, you realize that, people say, "Oh, music nowadays, like it's so much more
yeah.
suggestive." And I would argue that no, music has always been suggestive, but just because like socially there was like a lower threshold for what was acceptable, they were more creative with the way that they
Yeah, they
suggested
would sneak it
the
in. I mean,
concept.
yeah, if you think about the Stones and like Brown Sugar. I mean, Brown
Yeah.
Sugar, if you read the lyrics, how did that get through? How did it get through? Because
No.
it's pretty clear, but it because of the beat and maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
masked and it's not as loud, and you can
Mm-hmm.
hear, Keith playing the way he plays, and it was like, hey, you're getting drawn into the way Keith is playing, but Mick
Mm-hmm.
is saying something that is like, come on, it's like it's like you can't deny the sexuality of what he's saying. He's really getting into it, and there's a lot.
Yeah,
Even if you think about like Little Richard and Tutti Frutti and there's
that's
all
true.
kinds of things that are in these songs that people
Oh
say, oh,
yeah.
that people are like, oh, they didn't do that. It's like, really? Go back and listen.
No, go back and listen. You just like weren't aware of it at the time because yeah, like Mick got so much pushback during the early phases of his career. He really did. Well, and like, David Bowie throughout time and Prince,
Yeah.
like all of these people, like they were able to slip through because the music was just so jammable. Like there's no
Yeah.
way it wasn't going to be on the radio. But you still had parents up in arms like, no, we can't expose the youth to this kind of stuff. And the kind of stuff they didn't want them exposed to was just men like being a little bit more fluid in their expression of their gender,
Yeah, yeah, just now women are being more expressive in hip hop, and
Hmm.
it's kinda in the hip hop area, people are just totally, it used to be just underground, and now it's crossed totally over, where
Yeah.
and it's like people are like, "Wow." It's like it's way but, to me, it's like it's the same kind of Velvet Underground type of content that was there,
Yeah.
it's just being done in a different genre.
I
Um,
agree.
and it's coming through, and then people are like outraged. Well, there's stuff going on in the '60s and the '50s that you can find, in anything. You listen to old James Brown, and he's talking
Yeah.
about popcorn and all this stuff. It's like, well, what did he really say? And it was just they found euphemisms and different ways of saying something, and they're still their intent. They had an intent.
Yes.
Funkadelic had an intent, and they used to go into a lot of stuff. And
Yes.
I'm a big Funkadelic head, and people could say, well, listen to Funkadelic, and everybody's already done this. It's already been
Mm.
done. But it gets masked in the brilliance of like Bernie Worrell and Bootsy and all those guys playing so well that
Yeah.
sometimes you didn't hear what George was saying, or
It's
you missed it.
true.
You missed it because he was just throwing these things out.
Well, I like as a child listening to like the Doors and stuff, I didn't pick up on any of that. You like
Oh
middle
yeah,
school,
Jim
high school,
Morrison.
even. Yeah, Jim Morrison. But the funny thing is during the time that these songs were out, the people that were with it, like they knew what the songs were about, like the consumer of that audience. But the people outside of
Yeah,
it
yeah,
didn't necessarily know. Even like with the Beatles, who were considered to be very wholesome for a very long time. You can go back to some of their older stuff and pick out
yeah,
things where you're like, wait a minute. So these
yeah.
themes have always been here. They just were sneakier about them.
Yeah, you can slide it through because you had such an infectious beat. If you have a really good
Yeah.
beat, people miss the lyrical content. I've always been really interested in songs that are happy, right? Have a
Yeah.
very happy beat, but then the lyrical content
Is
is
melancholy.
dark. It's like
Hmm.
dark, and so you'll get this frenetic beat that will make you, dance or get you really into it. But when you actually listen to the lyrics, it's really dark. It's like
Yeah.
and or it's overtly sexual in a way that's like, well, how did that even get through? But because it's so infectious and has so much to it that people miss it or they don't really hear it because what people hear and what it is sometimes
Hmm.
totally they miss what it is. Like if you think about like Born in the USA, people
Oh
thought
yeah.
people took it and it's that's a patriotic song. He's talking about somebody coming back and they can't get a job. They come
Yeah.
back from the war and they're not doing well. It's not
Hmm.
talking about I'm having a good time in the USA. It's like, "Oh, come back. I'm a long gone daddy of the USA." I guess
Yeah.
you missed that part.
The funny thing is, people will grab like two words and the beat, and they're like, "Yes, I know what the song is about." But when you actually dig into it, you actually read the lyrics, you find it's a totally different song than you realize. That's kind of the wonderful thing about music is like you can go back to it at a different point in your life and understand it differently. But it's funny that you say that about the music can distract from the lyrics, and so it passes through a little bit easier. With Daddy, I actually specifically wanted the instrumental to leave a ton of space for the lyrics to like really shine so that that couldn't
Mhm.
happen.
Yeah,
um
that's why you get the controversy.
yeah,
'Cause
I wanted people to hear it.
Well, that in itself is a marketing strategy because, today you kind of have to kind of create a hype. And what is the hype? Like, what the hype is the content of the song,
Yeah,
because I want to challenge people's ideas, right?
exactly.
The idea that you're gonna go in and do a song that's gonna, challenge the mores, right? You challenge the social structure. And that's, you think about, like, when the Doors showed up on Ed Sullivan, they did Light My Fire, and they told
Yeah.
him, don't say higher. Don't go say that.
Mm.
And then Joe Morrison said, well, I don't care. I'm going to do it. Right. He just did it. And he's, well, and then they said, well, you'll never be on the show again. I was already on the show.
I was already on the show.
It didn't
Exactly.
matter.
Well, I love that. I mean, I feel like why appease that mainstream media thing? Because the thing is if you do, then you're always falling to the whims of like the mainstream opinions and media. And I am of the mind of like, don't make it too hard on yourself, but at the same time, like, don't fall for that. Like, stay with that artistic integrity. Don't hurt anybody in the process. Don't
Mhm.
make people so uncomfortable that it's like an issue. But I feel like when you're being authentic, even if it is a little bit spicy, it's very worthwhile in the end.
Well, yeah, I think the whole thing is like, I love your stage persona because you kind of
Thank
radiate
you.
that the kind of time period that I was very much into. Is like, if you think about in the 80s when Prince and that whole movement was that you could radiate that kind of sexuality, and
Yeah.
you didn't get, you could get on stage, you could get a big hit. It would work. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just part of the whole thing. And it was the fact that you could be kind of hypersexual was the
Mm-hmm.
nature of a lot of the bands. It's like, it's
Yes.
just like, because they were allowed to be what they were. And
Mm-hmm.
you could look at funk. Funk kind of set the mood for that.
It
And then
did.
funk would be too long. The thing about funk bands is they would go on for like 7, 8 minutes on a
Yeah, it
groove.
wasn't catchy enough. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What happened with the new wave is like guys like Prince, they's like, oh, I can knock that down to 3 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and 4 minutes and actually get it into a pop form, but still has that old school funk, but it's been kind of refined into that Minneapolis sound that was part of the new wave movement. And then people say,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I can use that Lynn drum and I can bring that Prophet 5 in or the Jupiter, and they can make these like pop epics that still have a funk bass to it. They still
Yes.
have that kind of rhythmic power, so they could go in different directions. That's what I liked
Mm-hmm.
about new wave. If you think about it, and you mentioned the guitar, was a lot of new wave bands. People just think about synths. Well,
Yeah.
almost every new wave band, from like Joy Division, New Order, Depeche Mode, there's a lot of guitar.
Yes.
Duran Duran is full of guitar. And without that guitar, it's not exactly all the way new wave. So a lot of people, oh, all these synth bands, but they weren't just synth bands.
No.
I think the nature of it was the bass and the guitar. They were full
Yeah.
bands.
No, they were full bands. Because, well, the bass and the guitar brought that like that funk, that swing, that movement into like these relatively pop songs. But I think they're so iconic for that reason. Like, that time period is super near and dear to my heart. I mean, I think it's very obvious like that influences my music heavily, and also like my aesthetic and my stage presence and all of that, because that's what I
Yeah,
primarily consumed growing up. And I think like that type of sexuality and stage performance, I loved it so much because it was coming from men. And I think it was like so new and so interesting to see a man do that during that time. And that's why people ate that up. I
yeah,
think like in the industry now, women have very sexual stage presences and they're very sexualized, but it's in a totally different way. It's like almost in this like porn star way, and it's
yeah,
very choreographed and very like in your face. And so I think for me, I always wanted to like hone my sexuality in terms of my performance, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be that theatrical
like
kind
like
of,
like yeah, like a
yeah, like,
Freddie Mercury, like a Bowie, like a
yes.
Prince. Like,
Yeah, where it was gender bendy. It wasn't like, oh, look at my fat ass, which is fine. Like
or
do whatever you want.
George Michael, Wham, and then the solo stuff is what you saw there is like people being able to have that kind of, gender bending. George Michael,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's in the same kind of category as a Freddie Mercury. He was channeling to
Yeah.
men and women, right? The Prince was
Yeah.
channeling to men and women. Bowie was channeling to men and women. He could attract both, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just the idea that I can understand that as a woman you want to be able to project like a Freddie Mercury and like a Prince, like a George Michael, and be considered, as an artist, not just an object type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just as artistic what you can do.
Well,
You could radiate this.
exactly. I
You
think
know,
for a long time, like early on, so very early on in my career, because I've been doing this for like 10 years, but I've been doing it in this way for only about 4. But like early on, I rejected my sexuality entirely because the way that it was being used was almost like against me. Like with people in the industry, they were like
mhm,
using my sexuality for their own ends. And I didn't like that. And I didn't like the
mhm,
way that they were doing it because it didn't feel authentic to myself. And then when I started to open up to it a little bit more, it was like this femme fatale. Like we were getting closer, but it wasn't quite there. I found
mhm.
in like taking on again, kind of like that mommy daddy vibe where it's both, I was able to just be so much more confident and
Mhm.
be like, yeah, like I'm a woman, but I'm also like I can stand here and have that same kind of energy as like a Mick Jagger or a Prince, not to compare myself to them, but like that same kind of
Yeah.
vein, and like stand on my own as a performer and not be a sexual object. Like my sexuality is part of the performance, it's part of the package. It isn't like that thing first and foremost that's slamming you over the head and then there's like a pretty voice in the background. I never wanted it to be that. I wanted it to be intentional and confident and powerful, the way that those men honed their sexuality. And I think I have slowly over time been able to lean into that. And it just kind of happened too. It was like something other people saw in me. And I felt like I was given permission to be that, which is really cool that I have that kind of audience.
Yeah, I think that's awesome to do that because from the whole start of the Ghost, was that I kind of owned my Josephine persona. Is that I
Yeah.
came out with like this female version of myself, and she was the lead voice on the first half of my catalog. It's
Mm-hmm.
only in the last year or two that I've actually started to do more voice songs that have a male voice. But I
Yeah.
still have the Josephine voices in my back pocket because the idea of Family Electric Ghost is I could be Josephine,
Yeah.
I can go cross between,
No,
and
I
and I
love that.
and it's because like it's that whole thing where my Prince could do Camille, you know, and
Yes.
and and George Michael could do his kind of Faith, but he could do the Wham kind of, and you could
Mm-hmm.
look at what he's doing, and it's like he's going both sides, and Freddie Mercury could project that early in his career. He was more androgynous, but then he
Yeah.
got the kind of German Berlin kind of look, but then
Yeah.
but he had been kind of more female looking, and then he
Yeah.
changed to kind of like hyper male. Um, but yeah, it's just the idea that the male artist can like jack and strut around with this kind of androgynous kind of vibe, but still be
Yeah.
considered, oh, he's a tough guy. Like if you
Yeah.
meet
See,
him in the
that's what I
bar,
love.
he's gonna kick your ass, but he's also hanging out with Bowie, and he's like, well, he's just as femme as Bowie.
Well,
you know,
that's what's so like the reason why that works is because like they're so confident in their femininity and masculinity that like the confidence and the femininity also is kind of like intimidating. And
mhm,
that's what I wanted. Like I didn't want to reject my femininity, but I feel I also have a lot of masculine inside of me. And they were
mm,
always at battle and war with each other. And I'm like, well, let's not do that anymore. Let's just be both. Like let's be authentic. And it's so much, it's just so much better. I feel like I can do so much more with it. And like the things that come out of me, the things that I can say, I think a lot more people don't realize that they don't really fit into either box exclusively all the time. Like I take a ton of inspiration from drag. Like
Yeah.
those are men in their daily life. And then when they're on stage, you know, they're their drag persona. And it's
Yeah.
not like a huge departure from them. It's just like this other thing, but it feels just as confident, just as authentic. And that's why, like, when I'm on stage, I do it up because it's
Mhm.
almost like my drag persona in a way.
Yeah, well, I've always been able I found like I never sang as a musician for a long time. I was just an
Yeah.
instrumentalist, and
Yeah.
then when I finally chose to sing, my female voice was the first voice anybody ever heard. Right.
Yeah. That's
And
cool.
I found that that worked for me because for some reason I didn't like my male voice. And a lot of
Interesting.
people, women have told me they love my male voice, but I didn't like it. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like so I didn't feel comfortable singing songs with my male voice until the last 2 years. But
Wow.
for some reason, I felt more comfortable with my Josephine persona, and I really vamped it up. And I said it was all like inside me. I had all these stories, and I never knew like, well, how
Yeah.
could I actually write these songs as a guy when they
Mm-hmm.
really were coming kind of from my feminine side? And so
Mm-hmm.
I wrote them from that perspective because I'm a writer, and I've been writing like Josephine came out of a bunch of short stories I wrote about a female character that was kind of
Yeah.
part of me, and then I created her, and I said, "Well, how could I ever turn that into music?" And then I found machines that let me do it,
I
and I
love
said,
that.
"Wow."
Yeah.
And then when I found it, I just went to town and I wrote tons and tons of songs, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was a very freeing thing as a writer because then I said, "Wow, I can have this mindset as a writer, and I can play Josephine electric." And
That's
you
cool.
know, and I got into it, and I never knew how my fans would like it, but I actually got here because of Josephine, because of the Josephine stuff. I got where I am now because people liked it, and
Yeah.
you just got to own it. And then a lot of people were like, some of my male friends were like, "How can you do that, Josephine?" I said, "Well, because she's part of me." And it's like
Yeah.
maybe you like it or you don't, but that's what it is.
Yeah. It's funny because you express having a side like that because I think that's so wonderful. And I think, like, you know, as a guy, being able to be so confidently in that and share your voice, like your Josephine voice, I think that's like, amazing. And not a lot of people feel confident enough in that side of themselves to even express it at all. And you know, I think that's why, like, when I see these dudes being like, I'm really uncomfortable with the way that she's like positioning these lyrics, I'm like, maybe you need to have a conversation with yourself. Like, maybe you do want to be held. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a bad
Yeah,
thing to have both of those sides. It's not any sort of commentary on your character. It's just a thing that exists in all of us in varying degrees. And to deny like one side is to cut off a whole part of your creative voice, which is so unfortunate. And I found, like, when I really leaned too much into one side, like my music would get very like samey and I would get frustrated because it's like how I really felt. Like the lens I really was seeing this situation through or the world through was not being communicated properly. And it's because I was like covering one eye, you know?
yeah. I mean, because the thing is, when you are able to be fluid,
Mm-hmm.
and the way I look at it is like, I use analog synths, I use modular, I use digital, I use whatever. There are people that only use analog, only use digital, only do this, only do that, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever serves the song. So sometimes Josephine serves the song, and sometimes Peg serves the
Yes.
song, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know which one until I start to do it, right? And then I was
Mm.
like, hey, Josephine's voice is really the voice for this song. And
Yeah.
then the next song is like, well, it needs to be Phantom because
Mm-hmm.
this song is coming from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found it's like, well, I'm not gonna think about it. It's just gonna be because a lot of times the music it just comes to me. I don't know how it comes to you. It just kind of feel like it's the muse, like the universe, and
Yeah.
I just open up my multi tracks and I just start playing, and then I go back
Yes.
and I say, hey, that's it, and I just record everything. I just put everything down, and then I go back and I listen to it and I say, hey, there it is, and it might be an hour into what I did. The last 15 minutes is really what it was. There's like that
Yeah.
finally gelled, and then that's the song. And I kind of let it just be. It's kind of like the way that, the idea of the Beatles is like when they did Let It Be, and when they did that stuff, they was like, okay, let's just jam. We spent so much time trying to create these like amazing songs. Let's just jam and see what we get. You know, there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. That's kind of how I operate. Like once in a while, I'll sit down and I'll have a particular idea and I'll execute it and boom. But a lot of the time, I just kind of I'm feeling inspired and I let whatever comes out come out. And, I don't release all of it, but I don't want to throttle myself and like limit what's coming out because it could be something like Daddy, like something I never expected that ends
Mhm.
up being one of my favorite things. And if you're throttling it or you have like too confined of an idea of what you should be writing and how you should be writing, you're just never going to have those special moments.
Yeah, it's interesting because you said you like daddy was like 3 years old, and I mean, part of what I do is that I have all these tapes of things I've been doing for years, and I
Hmm.
will go from time to time and go back and say, well, maybe there was something I didn't think was working, and
Hmm.
then I go back and I say, I hear it with a new set of ears because I was too close to it. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, this was really something I should have kept on working on, and then I'll actually do that, or I'll just totally off
Hmm.
the cuff do something brand new, and I might be getting ready to release an album, and then hey, what I just did in the last 2 hours, that's coming out as a single because that's it. Because I just want
That's it.
because, you never know. Because as a musician, you could be planning things, and then suddenly something comes, it's like, "Wow." And I think it's cool that we're independent now that, we if that happens, you don't have to have the machine say, "Hey, no, you already got something coming out, you can't do that."
Well, exactly. Well, I love the flexibility of being independent. Like, of course, there are benefits of signing to a label, but I'm of the mind where it's like, I want to be at such a good spot independently where if I ever do feel the need to be part of a label, I can like negotiate that deal to where it's something
Mhm.
I'm really going to feel good about because it's like not an I need you situation. It's this will just help elevate a little bit. But no, I totally feel that. Like I just barely recorded a song that is 7 years old. And I had produced it 4 times and it was just never the right moment. And then I got connected with a producer. His name's Nate Pfeiffer. He's done, oh, excuse me, I got a hair or something, but he's done production for like Cascade, Dead Mouse, stuff like that.
Mm. Oh, wow.
And I know, very cool. And we got connected, and this song suddenly it popped up in my head, and I'm like, maybe we record this song. And we did, and it is so good. And that's one of the songs that's going to be coming out in 2023. It was just like, it's been, 7 years. Didn't even think I would ever release this. The perfect moment appeared, and boom, I get to just do that. It's cool.
So, will Daddy be, combined in a release with that song, or are you just going singles for now? Are you, like,
So
releasing these separate things, or you're part of a bigger thing?
So I'm shaking it up just a little bit because I think my like sound and the lyrical and instrumental vibe has been in a very like tight pocket for a while. But the stuff that I've been writing and doing recently, I'm like having a lot more fun with it. Not that I wasn't having fun before, but I'm just taking risks I wasn't taking before. I think I've reached a level of proficiency where I feel confident doing that. And so I am just going with singles for the time being to see like what hits and what I feel good about. And then I have
Mhm.
more than enough of a body of work that's near completion to have a full album. So that's what I would like to do. If all goes to plan, it'll all come out in an album after I get a few singles out. But I like to leave myself room to pivot if I need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it 'cause I'm always guilty of, like, putting out too much stuff. Cause like, I put out this album, like, this year called Peg Forever, and it's
Yeah,
really, typical me being crazy. It's, like, 2 hours long.
yeah, it's great.
So so I'm like it's like, well, you think, well, Keith, we probably shouldn't put out another one, and then now guess what? Like, you got Trash Wave, and Trash Wave is, like, another hour long. And then
That's
so
great
the
though.
and then I ended up writing another one, and then I said, "You know what? Maybe," as I then I started doing singles. So I've got the
Yeah.
next couple releases are singles, but I still have these albums that are scheduled to come out. because I just
Mm-hmm.
went to town writing, and
Good.
I just I just I don't know, I write all the time, so I can't stop. So it's just I got a problem with that, but
I feel I write constantly too. I think I'm at this point where I try to maximize absolutely everything. And, because I am independent and I'm self employed and like I'm doing music and entertainment full time right now. I've been doing it for almost a year, which is crazy, full time. But right now, because I am independent and I'm using all my own resources, I'm like, we maximize the hell out of each of these and just really see like what's hitting, because I'm not of the mind of like, if something doesn't appeal to a broad audience, that it's bad and I'm not putting it out. It's just
Mm.
how I put it out might be different. Like it might be part of a collection and not be the single or that kind of thing.
Yeah, because today though, what I just started engaging like on my Facebook Reels. Like for some reason,
Nice.
for many years, like Facebook wouldn't monetize me, and then suddenly, like 2 weeks ago, they monetized my Reels,
That's
and
awesome.
they hadn't been, and I don't know what happened, but it just they suddenly started doing it. So then I went to town, and well, because the way the Reels work is they want them all the time, and then I've got so much
Yes.
content that I'm like, "Wow, that's gonna work." So then I just started, like, dumping tons of them, and it's actually, they're getting, like, thousands of plays, and I'm like,
That's so
it's enga
good.
but that's weird, like, the new media, like the TikTok and the Facebook Reels and the Shorts on, these new forms are kind of going against what the industry used to say is that, oh, you can't put out a lot of content, you can't keep on doing it. And now you can even do more than what you would do on Spotify. Like you could put a song a month out on Spotify, but on a reel, you could put like five a day.
Yeah,
And
you can put out an
you can go to,
insane amount of content.
yeah, you can put so many out that if you're like prolific, those formats actually encourage it and seems to like reward you for doing it. And I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, that's gonna fit me.
Well, that's what I love about these platforms. Like they have infuriating sides to them, like my videos will get taken down just because one too many people is made uncomfortable by me using a voice like this for like just a comedic reason. But but what I love about it is the flexibility and the freedom that it provides content creators and artists. Like I don't think I would have ever found this niche and been able to create in this way if it wasn't for TikTok and social media like that. If I was having to follow the standard model, and I was at first,
Mhm,
for the
mhm.
first like 5 years, I was trying to follow this standard model and it just didn't work because I wasn't the type of
Yeah,
content, the music I make, who I am, it doesn't fit that mold. But now it
yeah,
doesn't have to fit that mold. And that's very empowering. It's awesome.
yeah, because I mean, I've branched into podcasting, and that gave me a whole
Hmm.
new thing,
It
and
did, yeah.
I'm able to do a lot of stuff there. That and I go off in all kinds of weird directions. I talk to CEOs. I talk to
Hmm.
like gurus and shamans and all
I
kinds of
love that.
people. And I just started going off in that direction, and it kind of encourages you in the podcast world. It's like if I only used to do musicians, but then I started finding that engagement in podcast is like you talk to everybody. And
Yeah.
so it opened it up, and I still my love is to talk to people like you. That's what I started with, and that's what like to do the most. But I had to kind of open it up because the way the podcast world is, they like you to talk to as many people with different types of people as you
Yeah.
can to reach different audiences. But it just engages your whole you know what you can get into, because I was able to get into like working on a video game. I'm working with a
Yeah.
South African
Wow.
independent game developer, and I'm doing like an hour long soundtrack. It's going to take like a year,
That's so cool.
but that's what's going on today. Like if you work on video game, you can make a lot of money, way more than you do on Spotify doing a soundtrack for a video game.
Oh,
Just
it's
because
true.
you get the pay scales are totally different than what we get on Spotify and all the other streaming services when
Oh,
you start
yeah.
doing that type of content.
No,
Uh,
with me, so like with my music and with TikTok, I've started getting into like voice acting. And so voice acting, audiobooks, that sort of thing,
mhm,
just because people really liked my voice. I never would have even thought of doing that. But
that's
then
cool.
people started asking, and I was like, why the hell not? I'll give it a try. And like that, the money you can make from that is far and above what I can make from like a decently performing song on Spotify. And so it's like I get to do these fun, interesting things I would have never considered, probably never would have had the opportunity to do if it weren't for these different platforms. And it funds the thing that I love most. So
Yeah,
it's very cool.
that's kind of what happened with the podcast. The podcast has funded my obsessive 2 hour long album.
Yeah.
They're like, "How can you put that out?" Well, because I can do these other things, so I can. So, like, I don't really care, like, you're not supposed to put out an 8-minute song. Like, well, I did because, yeah, I put, like, 5 of them, but, I don't really care because, I grew up with, like, Yes and Peter Gabriel, Genesis, and Emerson, Lake& and Palmer, and I go there. That's the way I like to do.
Yeah.
And, even if that's not what is trending today, I'm
Mhm.
able to do it because of these other things, like the things that you're talking about, the sync licensing opportunities,
Mhm.
being able to, because your podcast, I'm working with a Japanese producer on a track. I'm working
Wow.
on like a track with a R&B producer, and you get these opportunities to work with other people because
Yeah.
they come to you and then they say, maybe I'm not like hitting as a neighborhood known person, but then I get to, being able to work with a Japanese producer. That's kind of cool to me. I'm like, I don't really care.
Agreed. Well, that's how I feel. It's like I love every part of the journey because I've decided to be open to all of these different things. So I make these friendships with other creators or producers, and then it's like I get to play a cool venue somewhere that I would have never considered. I get to have a friend come out and play one of my shows that I met through the internet, or I get to do some sort of collaboration that has nothing to do with music. I like it's very cool. I got asked to do voiceover work for an independent Japanese video game, and
Awesome.
when would that have ever happened
Yeah,
otherwise?
because
But it's
that's the whole thing.
amazing.
Yeah, well, the thing is we're creators, right? So as a
Hmm.
creator, part of what we gotta do is not put the ceiling on ourselves, like,
Yeah.
because like you were open to do excuse me, to being a voice actor.
Hmm.
And that's cool because some people it's like, "Well, I'm only gonna do rock, or I'm only gonna do trap, or I'm only gonna do, you know, trance." And I've
Hmm.
always talked to some electronic musicians, like other keyboardists, and they're like, there was a guy, and I was like, he was so narrow. He's like, all he wanted to do was trance, and I'm like, well, don't you think like if you opened it up, you could be doing other things? And he's like, well, I'm a trance purist. I'm like, okay, and I'm like, that's cool, but you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because like
Yeah.
maybe you should be open to like you could do something else. And
It's true.
yeah, I just think that you should try to open yourself up as much as possible.
I completely agree. I think artists have a really bad tendency of doing that, of being a purist. I certainly was a purist for a long time, but I realized it was harming me. But opening yourself up to other possibilities doesn't take anything from you. And it's strange that we have this mindset of like, if I even allow another possibility to like come into my purview, I'm like ruining everything else. Like somehow it's going to totally distract from that. But I found it to be the opposite. Like opening myself up to something like writing a song like Daddy or doing voice acting, it's just expanded my realm of possibilities even further. And so I'm like, well, let's experiment a little bit more. Let's try some new things and see where that gets me. And that has been a much more fun journey than being like, no, I'm doing this style of music. Like when I was a blues artist, I'm doing blues and I'm only doing blues forever. And that's it. I would have never been here, you know?
I mean, because the people like one of the things I'm into new wave, but I love punk. I love
Yeah.
listening to Black Flag and the Ramones and Who's
Yeah.
Do, the Replacements, and so like people wouldn't think like, but when I was younger, I had bands that were channeling like the Replacements, sounded like
Yeah.
Black Flag, sounded like Who's To Do, so or sounded like the early Clash, and I'm like, it's not people will be like, "Well, what's he doing?" Like, I've always been into that. So if I ever get an opportunity to jam with somebody who's kind of channeling the Clash or something, I'm like, I'll just go do it because I'm into it. And then some
Mhm.
of my fans who are into my other stuff are like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" It's like they get, 'cause because sometimes your fans are like, they don't want you to go out of your lane
No,
or
they
the lane
don't.
or the
Yeah.
lane that they're comfortable or what they expect you to be.
Mhm.
So sometimes you have to kind of like, well, maybe you're a fan of this period of my work, maybe not a fan of this period.
Yes, and I find that to be fine, right? Like I don't want to get to where I'm like pandering to fans for like what they used to like, right? I'm like if you like my old stuff, awesome. If you like my new stuff, awesome. Like if you like the in between stuff, whatever, if it's something I put out 6 months from now that grabs you, that's great. I don't feel like you need to like all of it. I think I try to operate under just putting out what feels good to me. Like when I
Mhm.
get that, that feeling where you just get that, oh, that's it. That's it.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Whether it's a video or it's a song, when I get that feeling of that's it, I do it. Right. And so my boyfriend tells me that I'm doing everything on hard mode because I won't niche myself. But to be honest, I have this following now that wants that diversity of content. And they really love that about me. And they love that about what I do. And if I'd niched myself, I would have a way harder time pivoting down the line. So I feel like it was the right choice, even though it was
Well,
way harder.
I think we're all vindicated because my whole reason I named my like independent like label that I put everything under expansive sound is because
Hmm.
I didn't want to be in a niche.
Yeah.
Because one day I want to channel like Folsom Prison Blues. One day I want
Yeah.
to channel like, because I'm into like Sun Ra, or I want to get
Hmm.
into like Coltrane, and I'll just do like a jazz fusion set, and people are like, "Well, that's not new wave." It's like, no, it's not. But it's like, if that's the idea of expansive is if I want to go there, I'll go there. And I don't want, and I think there's a lot of people today that are starting to realize that's kind of the way to be. There are more people who are willing to cross and do country with hip hop or
Hmm.
fusion with rap or even punk mixing with rap. People are starting to realize that crossing lanes, that's how you create something new.
It is.
That's how
Yeah.
you get a Talking Heads coming out of
Hmm.
CBGBs at the same time you get a Ramones and a Blondie.
It
You
will
know, you
exactly.
had, in that same scene, not everybody in that scene sounded the same. I mean, the Talking Heads and Blondie don't sound the same at all compared to the
No.
Ramones. They're all coming out of the same scene. So the idea that everybody in the scene has to sound the same is not true.
No, I don't think so. And I think there's also like when we go back to social media, there's this like social media sound of music that like pops off really well. But I find so many exceptions to that rule every single day of people that are being authentic and original. And because it isn't that same TikTok sound, even if it performs well, it does even better. And so even though again, like it's not as guaranteed, it's harder, it's not as likely. Like when I talk to people, because I also do social media management and some like artist development and consulting on the side as well. When I talk to people, I'm like, just because it's harder doesn't mean that it's wrong. Like you want to do
Mhm.
things that are going to like feed your soul, and then eventually that's going to feed your body and your life. And if you get to do some fun side things in the process, like voice acting, for instance, or
Yeah.
podcasting, whatever, leave yourself open to that because you never know what opportunities could open up. I've gotten opportunities in like fields for my music, like for my music that were completely unrelated to my music. And
Mhm.
like just from like my social media managing of other people's accounts, that got me opportunities for my music. So
Yeah.
it's like don't follow the trend. See why the trend works and then like flip it and do that.
Well, you follow the trend and you're like the Beatles and you make the Monkeys and you create like the same vibe. You give that Beatle
Yes.
vibe. And then what happened? The Beatle vibe didn't last, right? You couldn't keep on recreating the Beatles as the Monkeys or as a Big Star or as like any of
Mhm.
the other bad finger. Like it only went so far. People didn't want to
Yeah.
keep on hearing another bad finger. They wanted something
Mhm.
else, right? And so the idea that, okay, if I match the algorithm, that's the way. Okay, yeah, that's what your program's saying. That's what your software mind says. But
Mm-hmm.
your creative mind's gonna say, well, I don't want. I want to do something that is uniquely, what's in my heart or what I
Mm-hmm.
feel the muse is telling me to do, and that doesn't hit the TikTok algorithm off
Mm-hmm.
the bat.
Off the
Maybe
bat.
yeah, maybe it doesn't hit it off the bat, but maybe a couple weeks down the line it starts triggering something. So yeah, yeah, you have to be mindful of that because there's always people that want to just clone
Yes.
previous success, and that's been the industry. The industry always does that.
Oh yeah. I mean, for forever, in perpetuity, and it always will, because it's like it's all about the money, it's all about the numbers, and it's not necessarily about the long game. And I'm always about the long game, you know. And for me, I started making TikTok content purely just off of a whim, off of like what I really enjoyed. And it didn't hit for a year. It took a
Yeah,
year to find the right niche. And I think it also took a year to share my voice in a way that was compatible with that platform. Because yeah, you don't have to change who you are. You might have to change how you deliver something or how long it is, to fit the particular platform. And now boom, like unless I'm in trouble, which is often happening, um, I know how to hit the algorithm now with my voice, and that's really cool. But it did take a year, and so it's like
yeah.
patience, you know.
I think you have to like learn like each of these new things. Like first started doing the reels, and I wasn't doing it right, and now suddenly I'm doing it in a way that I'm finally monetized it,
Yeah.
and it was like wow, it's like how did I do that? And I just started thinking about it. It's like, well, I stopped thinking about it, and I just started doing what I like to do. And,
Yes.
and it was that, typically my stuff is 8 minutes long, but then when I bring it down, it's like a minute and a half or 90 seconds or 60. And I started to pick out of my 8 long sagas, like what I thought would work. And I
Mm-hmm.
just and I didn't really try to, I just took excerpts of what I already did. I didn't
Yeah.
like go and try to start it again. I just said, well, you know what? I'll just look for the hook and pull that out. And
That's perfect.
and that's all I had to do. And I was like, then I said, "Oh, that's all I have to do? Okay." And so I didn't have to like restart or rejigger my whole thing. I just took what I already had and found what would work within that.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, that's what's working for me. So, you know, I think that's what people have to do. You just have to experiment until you hit it right. You know.
Exactly. And you can't like tie it to your ego. You have to look at every video as an experiment. So, or like everything you put out into the world, look at it as an experiment, like a beautiful experiment. And that way, if it doesn't necessarily work out the way you'd hoped, it doesn't like conflict with your sense of self. And that's what I have to do. I'm like, all right, I experimented with this. It didn't work. Let's figure out why it didn't work. And then I can adjust and maybe do something different. Or maybe I don't even have to do something different. I just need to like cut it down in time or something along those lines, because
Yeah.
these platforms are so finicky. But yeah, I look at it all as a grand experiment. And that way, when it goes well, it's very exciting. And when it doesn't, it's like, oh, well, I just have to adjust.
Well, I just wanted to, we're probably at the end of our hour now,
Yeah, I
but
think so.
it always goes really well because, like, we've talked before, and I'm really into your vibe. I'm really happy that you're doing so well on TikTok.
Thank
That's all
you.
awesome. And I do love the song Daddy very much. I'm looking forward to the next single. When is that going to drop?
I don't have a specific date just yet, but we're looking at February or March.
That's
Yeah.
cool. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're gonna probably do another PEG Veteran Producer Festival sometime in 2023. We're gonna
Okay.
do it again, so we'll let you know. And for those that don't know, we do that where we get all the people who've been on the podcast and we give them like a half hour to do either all video or live or whatever they want to do, and we give them the stage for like a half hour, 20 minutes. And so hopefully, yeah, we'll be putting that together probably like in March or April this year, but
Yes.
coming
Okay.
up.
Well,
So
let's
thank you
do it.
again for being. Yeah, I think everybody should go and check out Daddy, and you want them to go check out Daddy from this link is the place they should start from, right?
Yeah. If you go from that link, it leads you to like everywhere that Daddy is and just any other applicable links. But you can also just find it on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere music is sold.
Well, this will be clickable when we fully publish, which is always cool.
Beautiful.
So when we get out there, and we've been doing a new thing where we create a landing page, and we'll give you the landing page, and it will have like the YouTube, the Facebook, the Spotify, the Apple, and the Twitch all on one like landing
Awesome.
page, and we'll send you that. So that's our new thing that we figured out how to do, and then we started say, hey, we know how to do it, so let's do that.
I love that. That's great. Beautiful.
Okay, so thank you very much. Have a
Thank
great,
you.
great rest of your evening, and everybody check out Cera Gibson Daddy everywhere you can get it, and please subscribe to it, playlist it, download it, buy it, and
Yes.
we'll talk to you again. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Bye, Peg. Thank you.